Acca Howler has a hidden King Crimson reference, on top of the Howler and whatever stand he has. Everything about his character lines up with their song, The Great Deceiver. His introduction matches the first verse, the chorus conveys his spoiled and expensive lifestyle, and what we know of his backstory fits the tale in the second verse. Something was granted to him when he was young, so he then grew up spoiled without developing critical life skills or any independence, and now he runs a front for some criminal operation. In other words, because of some shenanigans, Acca Howler was given power too early for him to know how to be responsible with it, so it set him down a path where he'd become a self-destructive mess. His stand is falling apart as his competence deteriorates, and his role in life is just a pawn, with a lot of infamy, so the spotlight gets taken off of someone else. Even going by his outfit, he was put on the fast track, there are holes in his constitution, and his lineage is choking him. The Howlers are named like livestock, but in Acca's case, his title is also a collar with a leash, because somebody ensured he'd grow up useless. So even though company assets are under his name, he can be as frivolous and impulsive as he wants, and they would only stand to gain by letting him stomp around. But if someone did make Acca turn out this way, when did it happen? And what were they able to do? The Great Deceiver implies they either caused or took advantage of when Acca was able to use the lava rocks to probably take all sorts of family assets too early. After all, if he discovered the rocks as a kid, he would have tried them out on the most valuable things his family owned. And the most efficient way to give it all to him, according to a rock that sees no issue causing human harm when it's the easiest means to an end, would be to have those family members die in the most inheritable sequence. Then any shady business partner would have jumped at the opportunity to stunt and control the next Howler head. But the Great Deceiver, which I don't believe is Acca's stand, is also tied to another King Crimson song, and that song implies there's another King Crimson power pulling the strings in part 9, and likely it's the thing that messed up Acca's future. One trend for JoJo parts in the new universe is that the main characters embrace human agency, whereas the main villains offer power to automatic systems. Cause when strength is relative, because being stronger in some aspect means other things are proportionally weaker to that aspect, you can say that some equivalent exchange is inherent to the universe. But there's a difference between using rules to cause positive change and launching an additional system that drags everyone else down, because even though you also relinquish your agency to it, its favoritism gives you advantage over others. That's why the spin, symbolic of agency, because rotation is the idea of being able to apply whatever limited stuff you're given in different ways, grants Johnny and Josuke powers to channel the consequences of equivalent exchange. Act 4 can control who gets the misfortunes transferred by the corpse, and Josuke's bubbles built from spin can exchange things and create wiggle room in bindings by removing stuff. Their villains, Valentine and Toru, both guaranteed forms of equivalent exchange, because since those systems had their backs, they didn't have to care about the randomness of the consequences, granting them freedom relative to other people as everyone else was trapped in the chaos. Valentine's specific power came from exclusivity. He required a status not everyone can have, first by being the only person to survive and receive a soul artifact from an ancient trial ground, and then being elected to a position above individual people that only one person can have at a time. And he wanted to take sole ownership over a relic that would steal everything good to help his society, because he prioritized the guarantee of taking what's already there over the less certain process of making new good things. Then Toru's strength came from how he was born with more advantages than others. The universe granted him resources, knowledge, and talents that he could draw from, so if anyone contested him, he could lean on the disparity in their birth advantages, which would always be in his favor. His stand just represented that, which is why Wonder Review was an invincible counter, even if it meant he could never proactively try to change his status to raise it further, because destabilizing it would mean the consequences of his actions might domino effect until something's born that's exempt from his calamity, Poochie style. Main villains in the new universe have powers of inequality over others, and they weaponize whatever system favors them. Part 7 was about standing on your own, so the enemy system was appealing to higher powers, and Part 8 was about appreciating what you have, so its system was inevitable calamity that could always ruin anything. In Part 9, water is used to symbolize its ability to carry things and flow. The ground-level eyes of the puppeteers are named after port cities, as they might facilitate the business of trafficking illicit goods, whether it's drugs, weaponry, stolen property, or people, since distribution seems to be how this empire makes money. Their legal partner is a water infrastructure company, a business that lets water flow through already inhabited locations to reach further into regular society. So this organization is built on distribution and creating flows of money through it. But then it makes the most sense if forced ownership and possession is the system Jodio will end up fighting, which would mean that distribution is the power that would let some villain weaponize it. And following that theme, if somebody is truly puppeteering Acca Howler, their power could be tied to displacing things and automatic control over their flow, because something did trap him in its scheme, cutting off his potential, and now he's slowly breaking down, because it doesn't care about how the pieces it uses or moves around for personal gain get damaged or suffocate from their extraction. If the main villain is behind this, they have a power that can separate something, cart it off somewhere that's useful for them, and set it on a track so it's stuck in a system that orients its potential value to benefit the user, kinda like how museums would amputate parts of statues to add to their own collections. And for Acca, their power did this by boxing him into this role of seeming like an insatiable billionaire who was born into money, which is similar to something like the Mincer function, which is an economic model that simplifies the agency of individual civilians because in wider scale analysis, it's easier to treat people's ranges of financial potential as the result of universal predetermined factors and opportunities. The Mincer equation specifically is used to read large sets of data and predict how much money someone would earn in a position based on how much time they've spent on that path and how much education they've been given. Like saying that Acca's future and profitability are set by how he was groomed and the longer he's slowly being digested in his role. But the most relevant detail of it is that the Mincer is a King Crimson song from the same album as The Great Deceiver. The lyrics are about something unseen that's been terrorizing somebody, isolating them but then keeping them alive for some reason, when its desires clearly involve causing them misfortune. But just like how the Mate Kudasai was inspired by meta-trivia about the song, about how the original was secretly replaced on later albums, the Mincer has a fun fact about it as well. A year before the album came out, there was a live show where King Crimson improvised a bunch of music. Decades later, in the 90s, a compilation named after The Great Deceiver was released that included some recordings from that show. One piece was an instrumental from that night that was broken into two parts because supposedly the band believed their recording devices ran out of tape during the middle. But even later in the 2000s, they rediscovered the middle section of the piece because it turned out that at the time, they'd extracted that segment to use as the instrumentals for a song they'd then released the next year called The Mincer. If someone has a power to sever, displace, and redistribute pieces of things for personal gain, ignoring the scarring or losses caused to them, it would explain why Acca's life feels like it's been carved up and given a title to disguise it. And the effect of a stronger power that we know cut off Acca's potential by setting him on a path within a trajectory rigged to fulfill its goals is that his stand looks like it's being minced. The Mincer would be the stand of someone who ignores but benefits the most from societal values, like the concept of property, which they'd be taking advantage of to move and assign purposes to what they label as theirs. They would be someone who lets flows happen because they use flows to carry what they have, and their power would be to conquer resources and then fit their remains into places they'd be helpful. So if the Mincer exists, Acca's lack of responsibility isn't a result of him failing to use the resources and time that he had growing up to turn into an accountable adult, because somebody forced the path that would shape him into adulthood. He never had the unsabotaged opportunities to learn that would make his immaturity on him. And since the only direct difference between privilege you're born with and power you gain through effort is cosmetic in a fated world with cause and effect, what separates them is the characters of the people they're associated with. Someone fated to earn power over time is likely to be more responsible with it, because someone granted it right away hasn't had their personality put through that funnel. But neither of them deserve it more than the other, because no one can really be an underdog when anyone who looks like they struggled to the top was always meant to. So what matters is what drives each person in crucial decisions, rather than what starting positions they seem to have. And Acca is just in his awakening, because until now, sabotage has prevented him from tapping into the character in his heart that he would have with his own agency. He could just be a cautionary tale who never gets this opportunity or turns out to genuinely suck, but he has a chance to grow as long as someone can push the trapped version of him to step out of the comfort of his current cage and show what he's really made of before it's too late, which makes him like a reimagining of Emporio. And he would also contrast Jodio, who's been controlling the narrative from from the beginning and presents himself as an underdog despite having had a mechanism for most of the story now that already puts him above almost everyone else in the world, and revealing concerning values in his decisions during the unprecedented situations we see him presented with. As it stands, Acca Howler feels like someone's Doppio, and his stand is probably tied to taking things for personal gain like a main villain's would be. But his power both seems to be and would make sense for his character if it's powered by being granted opportunities by something sentient above him, which is why I don't think the Mincer would be Acca's power. But if it's not identified, then going after Howler will make it feel like the absurd is causing things to go wrong and put someone through maximum distress.